All right. Um, Welcome. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jen Hanauer. I'm the Plan Board Secretary for the City of Dayton. I've been muting everybody as they come in, but if you could take care to only unmute yourself when it's time for questions and conversation at the end, that'd be much appreciated. I know a lot of you have been through this process before, but just as kind of an introduction, this is a proposed zoning code text amendment for group homes in Dayton. Group homes have been a bit of a hot topic as we have a bit of a flood of them in Dayton. So in part, this is going to be addressed through our zoning code, and the process for amending our zoning code to include something like this will go to Plan Board, which it's set to do next Tuesday, July 8th. And they'll make a recommendation to City Commission. Then we'll set a City Commission date, probably later this summer, before the end of summer. And they'll have the final decision on what the language is that we put into our zoning code. With us this evening, we have Kirsten French, who is our zoning administrator. And she has done a ton of research on this communication with nearby municipalities and at the state level to help understand the context of this issue that we're in and the kind of seems like ever evolving landscape of the kind of legal parameters of group homes in the state of Ohio. So with that, I'm going to let Kirsten introduce this topic and talk about some of the details of the proposed text amendment. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions. You're also welcome to put questions in the chat and we'll address those once Kirsten finishes her presentation. So go ahead, Kirsten.
Did I share the right screen, Jen?
I am looking at a screen that says information session.
Perfect. All right. Okay, so I'm Kirsten. I work in zoning. I work alongside the building department, kind of in the middle of building, housing, and planning here at Dayton. But zoning, we're a little bit separate, but we're all in the planning, neighborhoods, and development department. I probably got sucked into this because we do all of the permits for group home applications here in Dayton. So we have a lot of interface with the operators of group homes here and a little bit more firsthand looks at the structures that are proposed for group homes. And it's been a real pleasure. This has been a huge project though, and there's a load of complexity that comes with group homes, partly because they are regulated on all three levels of government. We've got zoning stuff to say about it. There's the state that produces licenses or gives licenses for different types of residential facilities, group homes. There's federal fair housing. So there is a lot of complexity to satisfying all levels of government when it pertains to this topic. State of Ohio also has several types of what they call residential facilities. So in order to draft something that works, you have to be paying attention to all the types of residential facilities that are out there. I'll use those two terms interchangeably. They really are the same thing, but we'll get into a lot more detail as we go forward. Oh, I gotta click over here. Okay. As Jen said, this is going to be a zoning code text amendment, so we're following the same process that any zoning code text amendment would follow, getting the plan board approval, followed by city commission adoption. And we'll keep going here. There's plenty more detail. So we've got our project background. We also have just how did this all come about? What are we seeing in the community right now? In 2024, the City of Dayton's City Commission passed a moratorium. And I think that is probably what most people have been hearing about recently. It's been in the news. A moratorium is just a temporary pause on the acceptance of new applications of something. You can pass a moratorium for any kind of topic. Another one right now is gas stations, not here in Dayton, but in other jurisdictions surrounding us. I see those moratoriums being enacted. Essentially, a moratorium is just a temporary pause, and all it's meant to do is to kind of drop a veil over the situation while the city does its research, does its community engagement. It prevents a rush of applications under the old rules that you've already decided are inadequate for your system. So that is what we are under now. The city enacted a 6-month, extended it another 6 months, probably should have done 12 to begin with. You know, this has been a slow thing for me to wrap my head around, and we've done a lot of drafts. We're actually on the 7th iteration of our draft right now. It's just that complex. And we've had some legal review, and we've, you know, gone back to the drawing board on a couple parts of this topic. All right, so group homes are licensed by the state of Ohio. They're typically operated within residential homes. So what you think of as a single family home or a duplex or something like that. They are not, the terminology residential facility to me always sounded very institutional. They're not really institutional. They're meant to be in homes, so you would see these in your neighborhood. So group homes are meant to serve populations facing similar behavioral, rehabilitative, or other kind of healthcare needs so that they can pool resources, often coming from the state itself, in terms of monetary funds, so that they can get the housing they need and the supervision or healthcare that they need. Peer support can be also another feature. Sometimes people are wanting to live with other people who are in similar situations as themselves. Now this came about, this whole moratorium and this entire topic came about based on our experience with foster care group homes, a certain subset of the group homes that exist. So right now, the north, central, and west land use geographies of the city, and we'll have some maps, that we've experienced quite a bit of inundation with foster care group homes. So has Trotwood, so has Harrison Township. These group homes for foster care, basically, you know, they've come on the radar so easily because children go to school, and so the school systems are noticing the influx of children who are living in a group home setting. Our emergency services have seen increases in phone calls because the state, of course, requires operators to notify emergency services if a child leaves their care and, you know, wanders off or goes to do something that they weren't authorized to. So we've seen those numbers pop up, and so the conversations sort of all converged: zoning and emergency services and our local justice system and our healthcare system and our education system all kind of having a conversation with one another. So this is just a very brief overview of the summary of proposed changes to our zoning code. So if you don't get to make it through all of the drier specific text, which will be in, you know, the further slides, let's go over the basics here. So what is proposed is spacing, essentially. So spacing between all residential facilities. We'll get into that with greater detail. At 1,000 feet, that's about 1.5 blocks of distance between homes. For foster care group homes in particular, there are land use geographies. We'll show you the map. And each of those geographies would be capped at 12 homes. We'll get into more detail about that. Group homes would not be permitted to open either directly adjacent to or on any city block face containing a home or property declared a public nuisance. Okay, that's to try to increase the quality of the group homes that are being proposed. Group homes would need to be conducted within a single family home. Unless the structure is a duplex, there's an exception for the owner or operator living in one side of a duplex. Reason being, it seems like many of the people in a group home setting are either in crisis of some kind or need some particular privacy, and it does not seem appropriate for every type of group home to share a backyard setting or, you know, common space within a structure's property. So we'd like to see those directed toward the many available single family homes that are out there. New group homes will be required to have an interior and exterior inspection prior to opening. We've always had the ability to do this. It hasn't been done consistently over time, but we think it should be a requirement for any new group home to undergo both the interior and exterior inspection at least once with zoning. And our people are also property maintenance trained, so they, you know, they know both sides of our code, which for us would be our Chapter 93 for housing. All right, and I should just mention that existing group homes are not affected by zoning ordinance changes. So those that exist do not have to follow new rules. So the spacing, we're not here to close any existing homes down, but we can talk about some of the things that are happening at the state level, and those changes and how those things may affect maybe some group homes in our community, maybe not, though. It's really just a quality standard and a license checkup that's kind of going on as far as I can see it. All right, so group home is just a house with a certain type of operation in it. You might not be able to tell that a group home is a group home just by looking at it, but sometimes you can. Usually it is about 5 or fewer people receiving assistance or housing assistance of some kind in the home. There's an operator that probably lives off-site, but sometimes lives on-site, and usually there are employees that the operator hires to staff the facility over the course of a day. You know, 8-hour shifts, so 3 people typically. Sometimes it seems like what people are seeing when they see a lot of people living somewhere is staff coming in and out for shifts. So at least that's been my experience so far. Although there are definitely homes that have more than 5 people in them, there's different exceptions to that. All right, so we'll get into the different type of facilities that the state licenses. They are licensed according to the agency that they are working with. So the Department of Youth licenses foster care group homes, and those host children in foster care up to age 21 who are aging out. Here's the Ohio Revised Code section in the middle if you want to look up the specific rules for that. Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, or OMAS, licenses those homes that are for addiction recovery and also for mental and behavioral health. There's an asterisk there because there are actually 3 classifications. They would call them all residential facilities, but for us, a class 1 is not the same thing as a class 2 or a class 3. Class 1 would be something we'd call protective care. We've clarified that in our new draft. A class 2 is something we would call a group home, and a class 3 is something we would call a boarding house, or most like a boarding house. DODD, which is the Department of Developmental Disabilities, licenses residential facilities that are for developmentally disabled adults or children. And the Department of Health also issues licenses for aging adults. All right, so this says group homes, and this is actually just for foster care group homes, this map here. What this is showing you is that there is a high concentration of foster care group homes in Montgomery County. We have more than our, these are in absolute numbers, but you can also just imagine, you should imagine that we are not bigger than Cuyahoga County or Franklin County or Hamilton County, and yet we have far more homes here in Montgomery County. Taking that data, and this is a little out of date, our number would be right now 0.19 because we've had more homes coming in. This is again foster care. This is normalized for our population just so you can compare across other counties. So in Montgomery County, we have a very high proportion of foster care group homes, especially when you consider the population size for us is much lower than other places. So, you know, I guess what you could say in real terms, like we have 12 times more group homes than Cuyahoga County, or 15 times more, you know, so that's the comparison that we're at right now. We have many times more than our peer cities or peer counties. Foster care group homes in Montgomery County. This is our 2025 data mapped. This came from the Department of Youth. This is zoomed out just to show you that even within Montgomery County, the distribution is not somehow even among all jurisdictions. It's mostly happening here in Dayton, in Trotwood, in Harrison Township, the same places that have their own moratoriums in place right now. There are some in west of us. There's not very many south of us, or in Huber Heights, for example. Zoomed in, I'm told you can see my mouse. we'll have a map that labels these land use geographies, but this right here is where we have the highest concentration. This is our north central land use geography. We have many, many group homes here. We have many, many group homes for foster care here in West Dayton, and not so many spread out on the east side of Dayton. Somebody in the previous session asked the question why, which is of course a great question to ask. Why have they concentrated where they have? And we can take our best guess, but here's my stab at it. The housing prices are lower for the kind of house you can get. You can get a pretty decent house in these neighborhoods for less money than you can get in other places. I know I also moved to this neighborhood for the same reasons. And also, it does seem to me that there is a network of foster care group home providers out there. And once somebody is opened a house somewhere, they have experience opening a house in that jurisdiction, in that place, and they might open another and teach a few more people how to do the same. And so I think once it's determined that it's pretty easy to get the thing done in a certain place, you just get a lot of people recommending to others to do the same thing, and you end up with this concentration. All right, so we have, this is just a map showing those land use areas, just so you can visualize them a little bit better. We were just talking about north central and west. There's also northeast, southeast, and downtown. This is just geographies to help split the city up for conceptual purposes and planning purposes. So per the geography, this is, instead of just looking at those dots, we've got numbers. This is again foster care specific. So North Central has, and so almost double what West has, and they both have quite a lot. So we really are inundated with foster care group homes here. Northeast has just 4, downtown and southeast, and I'm going to put these together for a particular reason. Especially because our ordinance is going to do that. Our drafted ordinance puts together the downtown and southeast geography into one for the purposes of counting up to 12. Why do we do that? Because we've asked people to look for a single family home, and single family homes are not so much in the heart of downtown Dayton. They're not so much going to be found right around the university. So you only have a couple of neighborhoods left here where you find a single family home, and it makes sense both for us and for the group home operators, in my opinion, to have a larger geography to search within, rather than us getting really specific and saying, okay, there can only be 3 here and now 9 over there. That seemed to be a little bit too restrictive. You might as well have the whole area to look at. This data is not good. There's worse ways to say it. There's a lot of junk data within this, partly because, so the blue dots are great. Those are from Department of Youth. The pink dots are from Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, and I have to go through each of those dot by dot and make sure it makes sense, because a lot of these places seem to be commercial locations that are not actual residential facilities. I've got an upcoming call with them to talk about how to parse out their data and to see if we've got the correct stuff from them. But I just wanted to include this to show that even though what we're doing is capping the total numbers here in these geographies at 12 for foster care, and we're not doing that kind of same thing with other facility types. And also, just because you see this availability in these 2 basically this eastern half of our city, does not mean that that's the end of the discussion in terms of spreading out in geography. You'll still have to be 1,000 feet away from any other residential facility. So it's not just, I don't want any operators to think, okay, I'm in the right side of the city, so I should just go ahead and purchase a house, or start a lease or something before getting really specific with that property and its distance from all the other residential facilities in the city. We've had a lot of engagement. It's not all reported here, but here's just a basic overview. We had a first group home providers meeting last May. The mayor hosted this. It was represented by some state officials. Let's see, I think a local judge was there. Our education system had representation. Local law enforcement was there to present their numbers. And we heard the basics from our providers, and had some discussion that was very preliminary. We hadn't had any draft information yet at that time. As you can predict, just starting to talk about the thing sent applications spiking. Definitely that's what happens. It's just human nature. You want to get in while the getting's good. And so we had to pass a moratorium to prevent any further inundation of group home applications. In December, Plan Board hosted a work session where I think they saw, you know, a draft that is quite close to what we have. We've just made some minor revisions after they had recommended that we get an outside legal review of our draft, which we went forth and did. And then let's see, we extended the moratorium to continue our research and writing. We are currently in the information sessions being held for the public, but we had another round of engagement with the operators just I think it was about 3 weeks ago. We've been to the the Fairview neighborhood meeting. Talked to them about that a few weeks ago as well. And then up next comes the plan board review session, where they would make a recommendation on the actual specific text that we're about to go through. After that, it's going to City Commission for final approval. We may be extending the existing moratorium. That is just to provide full coverage through the transition period, while the text amendment is you have an ordinance passage and there's still 30 days for appeal, and we just want to make sure that we're fully covered through that. All right, I forgot to delete this one. We've kind of been through the summary of all this, and we can get right into the actual text. So this is a snippet of the ordinance, and basically what you'd be seeing is strike through of old stuff that we are trying to get rid of and replacement. Just because something is stricken doesn't mean those ideas have gone away. They might be found in the new text that's highlighted that's coming into the code. And what we're doing basically is a reformulation of what's in the code plus introduction of new standards. So we've basically, as an administrator, some of my confusion and criticism of our code and how it operated before is everything is residential facility or facility. Sounds very commercial, it sounds very institutional, and when somebody shows up to your counter, it's actually difficult using that kind of terminology when a group home makes a whole lot more sense because it's found in a home. So we're getting rid of some of our language and reformulating it into some new definitions. So first you'll see kind of striking the reference to the adult care facility and also the supported family living home, which is all getting reformulated into new definitions. The family definition is also changing. What we wanted to do with this was not create an exact occupancy limit in this section. We're using our housing ordinance to create that occupancy limit that is more consistent, that's more legal, it's better for us in the long term, but we also wanted to retain the idea of what people think of when they think of a family, which is a stable social type of unit that lives together, moves around together. They're not roommates. They don't just come together to live in that house and then disband from each other. They're a stable social function, because we want to have that definition so that a group home can be said to emulate a family. So we know if a group home is operating not so much properly, but just in the spirit and intent of what a group home should be, which is something that is residential. So you're seeing the introduction of a foster care group home type and a supportive care group home type, and then just the definition defining that operator who opens the group home. So for the foster care, we've split these into two, just very specifically because we have a particular issue right now with foster care group homes, and so we have additional standards that apply to them, so they need to have a separate definition. And supportive care is a catch-all for all the other types I talked about. We've got a standard just talking about the maximum occupancy in a space. That's usually something covered by the building code or the housing code, but we wanted to make some reference to it here because we do talk about maximum occupancies with group homes. And then with protective care and our other transitional housing definition, we wanted to make sure we were covering Class 1 residential facilities issued that are issued licenses by Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, as well as Class 3 residential facilities. So we wanted to be very specific about that, so there's no, I guess, administrative mix-up where you would think that a Class 1 facility could go in the inner core of a neighborhood where they really aren't suitable. We have stricken the residential facility definition in favor of the new group home definitions. Same thing with the supported living home, that is now covered by the group home supportive care. In the zoning code, you basically go to your zoning map, find out what zoning district your property is in, and then you go refer to these use tables. And these use tables would tell you what's permitted, what may be permitted conditionally with an approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So these tables needed to be altered to talk about these new group home types. I'll mention that the state law has changed and has made group home permits for foster care specifically revocable under certain circumstances if they are issued as conditional uses. To keep up with that and to take advantage, I guess, of that possible need, just all depending, most group homes are operated in a good manner. We don't really have problems with every single group home that's out there, but occasionally there is one or two that causes an issue. So this conditional use process is going to provide a pathway for the city of Dayton to revoke a permit if necessary. Sure would hate to have to go through that, but I think we should be taking advantage of what the state language is kind of giving to our local jurisdictions now. This does the exact same thing for the transitional district and mixed use hub, campus institutional. And then we get past this, you go further into our code, and we've got some supplemental standards where we've inserted this maximum occupancy concept. This is already in our housing code, but we want to make sure that the powers and duties and enforcement capabilities of the zoning administration is at least referencing this chapter 93 so that anyone can understand that review of the terms of chapter 93 can fall under zoning administration during the course of a review. Going further, conditional use and specific use regulations. This is a section of the code where any specific use can have further standards. And so this is where we're adding further standards. We've taken away those standards that are no longer applicable because we've gotten rid of these definitions. And we've added these group home, foster care, and supportive care standards. So we have added a long intent statement because it is our intent to raise the minimum standard for those people who are going to live in a residential facility or a group home. We want to make sure that the end user is getting the best result they can. We want to make sure that group homes are being well integrated into the community. We have a reasonable accommodation clause because many residential facilities are subject to fair housing. Not all, but many are. And fair housing covers housing for people who are protected classes, which in this case is the usual applicability of this is for those who have disabilities. And then we've got a whole bunch of general standards, and this is where the specific text comes from that I summarized before on what we were trying to introduce. So I'm going to go over all of this by reading it. So bear with me. All right, so first, group homes shall comply with the terms of licensing required by the state of Ohio. The zoning administrator shall verify details of the home operator's license, including but not limited to contact information for related state and county agencies issuing or involved with the home's license, any required operations plan, occupancy, and any required community engagement plan, in addition to those details required to determine compliance with the standards of the zoning code. An application may be denied on the basis of open complaints, violations, and corrective action required by the state of Ohio affecting the applicant's license. Zoning certificates that have been issued on the basis of false representations of the details of a license, intended occupancy, or other relevant details are subject to revocation. I have had this happen where somebody has given just like really half-hearted details on the application and then, you know, they're over occupying the place. Something very incomplete should not get you permanent ability or land use ability, property rights to continue if you misrepresented your application. Group home operators shall be required to submit accurate and current information prior to transfer of the group home to a new operator. So that is where you have the same house being used as a group home. It'll continue to be used as a group home, but the operator is changing. Maybe they are selling their property and they want to have a new operator come in. Well, we want their details. We want to know what their license looks like, and we want to know their contact information, and we want to stay up to date with that. That provision would apply to any existing group home. They need to continue to supply us with information. If the applicant is not the owner of the property in which the group is located, then the applicant shall provide a notarized letter from the property owner approving the property for use as a group home. So sometimes, actually, quite frequently, these homes are leased. So the owner of the actual property should be notified and understand that it's a group home that's being applied for, not any type of other type of residence. To prevent danger of fire spread and negative health impacts, no foster care group home shall be sited within the same block face or adjacent to a vacant home boarded or declared a public nuisance by the city. This standard shall not apply retroactively should a home within this distance fall into this state during the operation of the group home. The zoning administrator may provide exceptions to the standard based on the specific circumstances of the home declared a nuisance or based on other factors seen as relevant in pursuit of meeting the intent of the standard. So this is essentially a safeguard on choosing a house that it may itself be okay or just have basic property maintenance things to fix up, but is next to a house that just half burnt down or is boarded or is otherwise declared a nuisance by the city. And the exceptions, the reason that we might provide that standard is maybe that home declared a nuisance is being worked on and is coming out of a program, or the use nuisance that was declared on it may be expiring soon and the actual specific situation has been abated, so it's not actually posing a problem to the future residents. The zoning administrator shall perform an interior and exterior inspection of a proposed group home prior to the issuance of a zoning certificate. The purpose of this inspection is to ensure compliance with the property maintenance and occupancy standards of Chapter 93, housing, Chapter 99, non-residential building maintenance, and any other property maintenance standards adopted. The zoning administrator shall provide a reasonable time period for compliance with any violations discovered. Compliance with these code provisions is required before the application for a conditional use, where applicable, shall be accepted. Continued adherence to these standards after the issuance of a zoning certificate is required and is required to maintain any and all zoning certificates issued prior to the passage of this ordinance. This is true whether we've written it or not. Everybody has to adhere to property maintenance standards. This is basically just saying your certificate is connected to that. If your home is falling apart and you're still using it as a group home, you are absolutely liable for fixing those things, or else you may lose your zoning certificate. This is also saying that should there be something proposed that is supposed to go to a board, we are fixing the house first. You need to fix that house before you get to go to the board, because why talk about this if it's not actually eligible to be a home? Where a non-conforming group home has been voluntarily discontinued in accordance with 150.140, the structure's use shall thereafter be considered a family residence, and any subsequent proposal for a group home shall adhere to the standards of the zoning code. This is essentially just saying when the group home goes away, the house is just a regular family residence at that point. There's no need to come back for us to do a change of use back to a single family residence. The home can just be sold as a single family residence again. It's only when you are trying to reopen a group home that you would come back to us. Group homes of any category shall not be located within 1,000 feet of any other group home as measured from nearest lot line to nearest lot line. The zoning administrator may approve closer siting where two group homes are separated by natural or man-made barriers like steep terrain, waterways, or arterial roadways, which mark a more significant physical separation than distance. The idea here is that, so 1,000 feet is about 1.5 blocks. And let's say the purpose of this is to separate group homes physically from one another and essentially not inundate any single neighborhood with many, many group homes all in one spot. If you are separated by something like the river or Wolf Creek or um, a large arterial roadway that's already kind of providing that sense of separation between two things, we are not going to nickel and dime you on the 1,000 feet. We're going to say, okay, maybe 800 was good enough. You're on the other side of the river. So that's what that second statement really means. Group homes shall operate only from a single unit structure or may be located in a 2-unit structure where the group home operator or a staff member resides in the second dwelling unit as their primary residence. We have a couple of homes like this. It kind of makes sense. They have their own private residence over here. They have staff that comes and helps assist oversee children on the other side. That does make sense to me and doesn't seem to pose a problem. This arrangement within a 2-family dwelling must include ownership of the structure by the operator or entity who runs the group home. No more than one group home shall be located on a zoning lot. The plan board may permit arrangements of group homes in a campus-like setting or other design arrangements not specified by these standards through the approval of a plan development. So where somebody does want to have a certain type of group home that has a more institutional nature, or, there's many units where they'd like to provide services for people on a larger campus-like setting, you can come forward with a plan like that. It's not that we want to preclude just because we've said that only one group home per zoning lot, that something else couldn't be imagined and be put forward. A plan development, you should understand, is like a rezoning. So it takes the plan board to weigh in on that, and then it goes to the city commission for final approval. Everybody gets notified. It's a legislative action. You don't owe any property owner the approval of a plan development. So there's quite a bit of protection for neighborhoods by going through a process like this. A group home's total occupancy shall be limited by standards provided in section 93 housing, or as listed below, and it's kind of farther below, where the most restrictive standards shall apply. Specific standards for foster care group homes are as follows: to ensure the availability of City of Dayton services as well as the services provided by other agencies, and to prevent the excessive concentration of foster care group homes, these residences shall not exceed the maximum number allowed within the land use areas of the city in the north, central, west, and northeast land use areas. A maximum of 12 foster care group homes shall be permitted. In the downtown and southeast land use areas, a combined maximum of 12 foster care group homes shall be permitted. Occupancies of housing units are determined by the standards provided in Chapter 93 housing. Foster care group homes shall be occupied by no more than 5 residents. So even if you have a large home, you're still capped at 5. Nothing within these provisions shall prevent the placement of children or developmentally disabled adults under guardianship of a foster parent, adoptive parent, kinship, caregiver, or parent who is biologically related. We're not talking about foster care home settings that, most people ordinarily are speaking about. Not trying to touch that arrangement at all. Specific standards for supportive living group homes are as follows. In single-family districts, supportive living homes as licensed as Class 2 residential facilities according to Section 5119.34 of the Ohio Revised Code shall be occupied by no more than 5 residents. I'll preface by saying that these first 3 statements, actually a lot of these occupancy standards, we are taking the minimum that the state is requiring us to provide. So the state basically says local jurisdictions have to allow a minimum of this number of people to be licensed to live within single-family homes or multifamily districts. So there's these statements that we're having to correspond to at the state level, and that's what this is kind of reflecting, and then providing some additional standards for those things. So in single-family districts, supportive living homes as licensed as residential facilities under Section 5123.19 of the Ohio Revised Code shall be occupied by no more than 6 residents. Why 6 in this case? Because that's what the state says. So I can't go any lower than that. I'd rather everything be very consistent at 5, but unfortunately the state is saying 6. Okay, that's fine. We're just gonna go with that. We have plenty of other standards now in place to maximize quality, so that's good. In a multifamily district, existing single-family structures may be occupied by a supportive care group home without a conditional use permit where their occupancy does not exceed 5 residents. So this is here because up in those use tables, we talked about conditional uses within those multifamily districts. Why? Because below the number 4, the state is saying, hey, you have to allow a minimum of 9 people. I mean, if you've picked out an actual single family home that just happens to be in a multifamily district, then let's treat it like a single family home. And you can have up to 5 people, and it, no additional process is needed. It's just the same as if you found it in a single family home, where we're not allowed to have conditional use processes over those things. Within the MMF, which is mature multifamily, EMF, which is eclectic multifamily, and SMF, suburban multifamily zoning districts, a conditional use permit may be granted to permit an occupancy of up to 9 residents where the following conditions are met. These standards shall be in addition to all standards required of group homes with lower occupancies listed above. So this is where we're increasing from 5 to 9. Okay, so you'd have to have a minimum of 5 acres. Or I'm sorry, not 5 acres, half an acre. The structure proposed for higher occupancy is set back a minimum of 50 feet from any adjacent property line abutting a single family residential district. The applicant supplies an operations plan that demonstrates that neighboring lots will be minimally impacted in terms of traffic, noise, and residential character. So you're supposed to still be integrating into the fabric that you're going into versus setting up some kind of an institutional type of use. After all those standards, we have some parking standards. These really didn't change much from before, basically providing you have to give a parking space that's off street for every employee. And that is per shift. So just because you have split up your shifts into like 24 1-hour increments, you don't need to provide 24 parking spaces. You just need 1 per the employee who's there, plus half a space per occupant, and that gets rounded up. That's it. I guess we got through the whole code. We could talk about next steps, but maybe I can get through any questions that are in the chat for now. Got a lot of them. Let's see. Will existing group homes be required to have interior and exterior inspections? No, not by us, not by zoning. We're not going back over existing group homes into this setting they've already set up. That we don't really have much authority to do that retroactively with a zoning permit. However, they do get inspected annually by the licensing agency and by our fire department. So they are required to have those 2 inspections on an annual basis. As far as exterior inspections go, that can happen anytime without having to schedule. So I do imagine we will be touching base with those properties as well, just from the exterior standpoint. All right, without closing existing group homes, why exempt them from updates in zoning and inspections? That is just there's many reasons for that, but it's not so much specific to group homes. It's just the way that zoning works. We don't go to existing businesses after we've changed the code and say we can't go and say, hey, actually now we have imposed a spacing between gas stations, and now you guys can't really be here anymore. You guys have to spread out. That's not how property rights work in the state of Ohio. It's all a voluntary discontinuance basis. So if a property owner discontinues their use of something after a period of time, they sort of give up their property right to continue to do things the way they were doing them under some previous code, and they have to reapply, and then they have to follow to a reasonable degree the new standards in place. All right, Monica, why wouldn't we write the amendment to require inspections for the safety of residents in the home and maintaining code compliance and property values of the neighborhood? Maybe I have any more clarification for what that means. I think maybe part of this is that this is not a licensing program that we are doing at the local level. We don't really have the staff capacity to issue local licenses and maintain those licenses for you know, a few hundred probably. I would say we have 200, let's say, group homes of all various types in the city. Maybe it's a little less than that. Don't quote me on the exact number, but we don't have the staffing capacity to do annual inspections and annual keeping up, or even biannual or every 3-year inspections of those places. Not at this time. We're focused on the new homes coming in. We'd be focused on those homes that are creating the most problems for people. If they arise in our awareness, we have the relationships with the state to be able to report on those things and to be able to come up with solutions for those problems. So that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of capacities. And Monica, why did our per capita numbers go up if we had a moratorium on new group homes for the past 12 months? The number differences that I showed you were between 2023, when the data was taken at the state level, where I had all of the county's data, for this right here and this. All I did was plug in these numbers. And since I don't have updated numbers from all the counties of the state, I just took that snapshot rather than trying to pretend that probably everybody's went up over time. I'm sure there's more group homes now than there were before. But our per capita numbers went up only because our population did not go up and our group home numbers did go up. So yeah, between 2023 and 2024, when the moratorium was passed, we had an increase. We had plenty of new homes at that time.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes.
On that point, was there coordination between public health and Montgomery County Youth Services on these changes?
Tell me more. Ask me that a different way. Was there coordination in what
I'm
way?
just wondering in terms of the drafting, was there input from them, particularly Montgomery County Youth Services?
I see what you're saying. We have actually mostly been dealing with land. I've been dealing with land use attorneys in writing this draft for the most part. That's a great question. We operators have provided input, and I pared down some of the things that were in the draft based on certain feedback about the actual operations of group homes. I'd like to not try to interrupt the way people actually live together, but really be there at the point of choosing the home itself. There's always room for more input, and there's room for changes in the future. But no, I wouldn't say I brought together the full breadth of everybody out there. We've talked a lot with the city of Trotwood. We've talked to Harrison Township quite a bit about their issues, but we have to take this very particular land use perspective. I've been talking a lot with the Department of Youth directly, because they've undergone an ordinance change, and they are currently looking at adopting new administrative rules to reflect the new code changes. And we've been talking about kind of the public health aspects of like zooming out a little bit from the particular home you're talking about, and trying to license to what's going on that block, what's going on in that neighborhood. Are you giving everybody the full scope of what they deserve, essentially? Because I've just seen some things that really twisted my gut a little bit in terms of I'm surprised we're opening a home in this spot. Okay. All right, Keegan, 401 Otterbein and 20 Vassar were previously and or current group homes that did not appear on your map. Yeah, if you could tell me which kind of group home that would be, that would tell me where my data is going wrong. That would be helpful. I believe there could be some inconsistencies, especially with the OMAS data. The DYS should be very up to date, because I don't know if they've left some off. I don't know what to do about that, but we'll have to vet it. Because that should have been any and all within Montgomery County that they gave me. All right. Additionally, I was admitted to the meeting late, but were there any discussions on the requirements, community engagement plans? So we are collecting through our process community engagement plans for new group homes. I'm not going to be able to go back for all existing homes and get all of that information entered in immediately, but there's no reason why I couldn't be pulling that information directly from the state because they're all submitted to the state of Ohio. We've had neighbors who have had the side of their house covered in spit wads from the group home next door. They are a nuisance, but not to the point of criminal damaging. How can the operators be held accountable for calls for service from police, complaints from neighbors? That's a good question. This was asked in the first session as well. I am very happy to have my office act as some point of liaisonship to the state. But the state is going to be the entity that most holds accountable the licensee. So those operators have a relationship with the state. They work problems out with the state, and they also have corrective action plans that they do with their state licensing agencies. And so if the state licensing agency has some action that needs to be corrected, and we can help articulate those concerns, especially if they're happening a lot and you feel like they're not being heard, that is a good conduit for getting those things corrected. Monica says, please add a key to the map showing group homes and recovery homes, blue and red dots, and please explain again the distance requirements and how they do or don't apply to the various types of homes, foster care and recovery homes and boarding houses. So foster care and recovery homes are types of residential facilities. All residential facilities, all group homes will have 1,000-foot minimum separation from one another. To clarify, it's not 1,000 feet between just foster care and foster care or 1,000 feet between recovery and recovery. It's all of them are spaced in this way from each other.
But then may I ask a follow-up question? There
Sure.
is no limit to recovery homes within the planning,
Correct.
correct? Only the 12 within each quadrant of the city.
Just foster care. Yeah, that's right.
Did you choose not to put that limit on recovery homes? Was that a
So
reason?
yeah, that's
or
a great question. So how the answer to that comes from how did we land with that 12 number in the first place for foster care, and why can't I back into that number with anything else? So for foster care, we have better data. We've been talking about this longer. We have a closer relationship with the state, and there's data for me out there to at least estimate what our local needs are for foster care group homes within our city. So I used the number that was reported by the counties. Counties basically talk about how many children are in the foster care system on a daily basis. There's an average that they take, and you can go look at the other counties' averages. And then and this is not it's a reasonable way of looking at it. It's not some kind of social science accurate way of doing anything necessarily, but take that number and then pretend everybody is going into a group home and there are no more foster care families. How many group homes do we need? So first you have to guesstimate how many of those children are actually Dayton specific rather than county specific. So I took a proportion of our population, and then I assumed, just for the sake of not being too restrictive or not cutting off people from the services that they need, that Dayton generates more need than Oakwood for foster care. And then basically said, divide that by 5 because we can have 5 children in a home. So how many homes do we need? And the number landed right around 50. We have 72. So we have way more homes than we could possibly need, even though I'm making this very conservative calculation. So that is something, so divide that among those 4, that's 48. Okay. So I can't do that same math with sober living homes because I have no idea what the need is. So there's that problem. I have no idea. I showed you that faulty data that I'm getting. I kind of still don't know how many we have. Unfortunately, at this point, I need to know how many we have in order to regulate this and the spacing. And there's I need to vet all this data, but I would not want to be overly restrictive for some category of things and social service needs in our community that I really have no idea about. And that's not just for my general happiness. It's also just would not be very helpful from a legal standpoint, because anything can be that it would end up being declared arbitrary if I've got nothing to base a number on, if I just said this is enough for me. So that's why that 12, I think, made so much sense for foster care, and why those caps maybe don't make sense for residential facilities that are for sober living. The other reason is that so far, I mean, you can kind of like just picture these pink dots right here. There's no concentration that I can see in any particular land use geography for recovery homes like we are seeing for foster care homes. So this is not so much of a over concentration within one part of our city type of problem. So I think the 1,000-foot separation is handling this situation in a decent way. Also, recovery homes don't draw on the public school system that is so geographically oriented in the same way that foster care does. So there's kind of those reasons why we're treating the two different things differently.
So one other quick question on the 12, is that 12 additional in each of our planning areas or 12 going forward? So in other words, Northeast already has more than 12, but Southeast doesn't. I'm just,
Correct. Yeah, that's a good question. 12 total, not 12 going forward. North Central's all done with foster care homes until that number goes down to 12 to 11, and then a 12th could come in. West is done until that number goes down. Northeast would still have availability, but of course you still have to, like I said, contend with any other spacing requirements. And that I think is appropriate. I've got people who have, they want to build a home actually up here in some of our new neighborhoods to host a foster care group home. I don't necessarily see why they're in a different school district even than North Central. So it doesn't necessarily seem like a problem to me to have additional homes over there. And it allows some geographic spreading out within our city as well.
also your explanation on the not limiting the number of recovery homes. That was very helpful. Thanks.
No problem. No problem. Thanks for the question too.
I have a question. This is Kenya with Caring
Yes.
Hearts.
Hi.
Hi, and I know we worked together a lot in the past. So my question is, I know you said for new operators or new group home owners, what if you are already in an existing group home and want to expand, or even if you are leasing a property and decide you want to buy a property, does these same zoning rules and regulations apply?
Correct. Yes. And our permits, unlike your licenses with the state, although your license may have some bearing on the specific location you're choosing, our permits are so specific to location. So anytime you are opening any kind of location, it's not really a question of transferring around. It is a new application subject to the new rules. Now, it is something that may be talked about in the future. It's really a staffing capacity. We don't really have the ability to just like create and regulate a whole market, but it would make sense to me in some regard if we would cap lower and then also have a transferability of licenses so that we don't just see North Central with 37 licenses and they are held perpetually because now nobody wants to close a group home because you won't be able to reopen one. It'd be nice if we had a little bit more fluidity to the system than that, but it would take a huge staff load really to manage something like a licensing system where there's transferability involved. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so Monica has another, please reconsider combining downtown and southeast for the limit of 12 homes. Our area is most negatively impacted by large concentration of the short-term rental issue, which are not subject to regulations and frequently violate occupancy limits. Yeah, it's an interesting question how these two things work together. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting thing given there's like no group homes in downtown or southeast. There are both like these single family adjacent types of uses, so I can see the correspondence between the two things. There's
think-
already, yeah, go ahead, please.
Concern, and I can't speak for South Park, but they definitely were very concerned in the Preservation Dayton Forum. Oregon and South Park both have large enough homes that even though we haven't been we don't have the concentration of group homes. Maybe our prices are a little bit higher and, housing isn't as affordable.
Mhm.
We are really hit by drunken group homes, which are the short-term rentals.
Gotcha.
Concerned, it's just something to think about. I mean, I understand why you don't want to do 3 and 9 or 6 and 6 or whatever, but um, we're hit by another concentration of group homes with transient residents.
I
Or-
don't predict that you would see some kind of like all 12 going to downtown or something like the neighborhoods adjacent to downtown. I think it's way more likely that you see a halfway decent distribution between the two neighborhoods, if any new group homes are situated there at all. I mean, the prices are really different, and sometimes when the price changes enough, there's no difference to an operator at looking at Riverside or any other jurisdiction for the home versus a different part of our own geographies here in Dayton. I think the price dynamics are going to have already had such a big part to play. I'd be surprised if they stop being relevant to an operator when they're making these decisions. Let's see, even more than our own like land use kind of schemes. Let's see. So what is the timeline for revocation and removal of a group home? 30 days, 60 days longer? Keegan, I don't know. I forget. That will be dictated by the state in terms of if we would be using their mechanics to revoke a conditional use permit issued. I'm gonna have to review that, but I really think that that's only gonna pertain to the next homes that open. I'd have to figure out if the state has set up their system so that you could existing licenses being affected by those things. I don't actually know. Something I need to look up.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because if, a home is not maintained, right, and it
Okay.
falls below that threshold, right, for a housing violation, you mentioned that there is a revocation clause where you can revoke the conditional occupancy.
Right.
What does that time frame look like? Because these people may be in leases for a year long or more. They may be on a month-to-month lease. Like what are the expectations as an operator? Losing their conditional use, but still have to, pay the rent for another 9 months or whatever. But I
No,
feel like
it's
that's
really
something
good
that's going to
feedback.
be contested. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that it was addressed.
You're not wrong. I think maybe that does need a little bit more defining. From a policy practical standpoint, it seems like the more severe case gets moved along faster, and you've got tickets to civil fines all the way to revocation of a permit. But you're right, when it comes down to revocation and saying you're kind of all done forever here, maybe I need to have a little bit more mechanics written up. And it probably wouldn't be as fast as 30 days. Is it such a severe thing to happen? All right, I'm gonna write that down. I think we do have some code language about revocation of conditional use permits that's already in our code elsewhere for all conditional use permits, and I'll need to look at that too. Can't remember if we were just relying on those mechanics or if we need to have more.
Because all of you're taking permitted by right away for all of these group home cases, right? So they're all conditional anyways going forward.
Going forward,
Right.
and that's only for the foster care type. There's no benefit
Okay.
for the other types for us to try to take all of them to a board. If they meet all the other standards, they're also more likely to be a protected class, and it's a really awkward, odd thing to be throwing people with disabilities through this permit process when Fair Housing would say you shouldn't have to go to a board to ask for your housing. Which is not so much the case with the foster care group home type. Okay.
I have one more question. So the 1,000 foot rule. So if you have a youth foster care, but then maybe there's a mental health group home trying to open up, that 1,000 foot rule only applies to the category of foster care. Is that correct?
It is actually, when I was just reading it to you all now, I think it says foster care, and it's really for all group home types. All group home types have this 1,000 foot separation. I need to check the actual draft. But that might be my bad. So all group home types need to be spaced out 1,000 feet from all other group home types, according to the draft.
So it's a moratorium only on foster care group homes, though.
The moratorium applies to everybody right now.
Okay.
Yeah, all types. So part of the reason for this is I think at first we were drafting it so that it was just each type being spaced out from each similar type, with no kind of restriction on a sober living house opening near a foster care, opening near a DODD home, et cetera. The feedback we got from the plan board earlier on was separate all of them. It made more sense in their mind to separate every home from every other home, partly for better neighborhood absorption of homes that all require more social support, but also I think they had a concern about, why are we setting up a recovery home so that it can open literally right next to a foster care home. So that's where that came from.
So the other question I have around the spacing and the mapping here is, will these points be added to the zoning code map so that operators know where they can look for a group home? Because we don't really have any sort of mapping for conditional uses right now that have been approved in the city. And
Right.
so maintaining that going forward, I think is going to be really important to know what the conditional use was, what the criteria were for that, and whether the public can help try and enforce that or not too.
My thinking was I don't want to have dots on a map particular to houses, particular to kind of vulnerable populations just hanging out there. Some of this data is available at the state level. DYS does not display a public map, but some of the other agencies do. What we were going to produce is a GIS-based lookup system. So if somebody is looking, an operator is looking to open a new home, they see a house available on Zillow, they have an address, they can enter it into a search box. It doesn't show the map, and the search will basically tell them yes or no. Are they already over the maximum for that area for foster care? And yes or no, are they within a buffer of another home? And
Okay.
then from there, they'd be reaching out to our office to seek clarification on anything and ask for additional kind of review of that. And please, we hope everybody does that before they sign a lease or purchase a home.
Okay.
And of course, if that happens, we would tell them why, what caused the application to be denied for whatever reason, and give them any information that we have so that they can go and check and say, no, that home has been closed for 2 years. So your data must be wrong. We would of course be transparent about all that so that we can move forward.
Okay.
All right. Please clarify the state's number of maximum and minimum occupancy requirements. Does the state require and allow a minimum square footage of living space per occupant? Yes, they do require minimum square footage of living space per occupant. It seems to I think those are coming from their administrative rules, and they seem to very closely correspond with our minimums in our housing code. So those numbers must have been around in various codes for a long period of time. But it's like this. It's like, hey, you need to have 130 square feet in your dwelling unit, and you need to have 80 square feet in your bedroom per occupant. And then the next occupant needs another 70 square feet. So if you want 2 people in a bedroom, you're going to have 130 square feet. So it goes like that. And so we would be looking at those floor plans, evaluating the same thing, or what did I say? 150 square feet. So that is what our section 93 is doing. The state's occupancy stuff that I was quoting here if you go into that table I showed you previously where it has those ORC sections, you can look those up and they will say in those ORC sections, any individual may open a group home for, basically a residential facility of this type that has, and will be allowed to have a minimum of 5 people occupying. So then we have to have our laws correspond to those numbers. So if it said 6, it's got to say 6 for us, or else we are subject to challenge with that number 5. So we've basically taken the minimum. It's my guess that the fire code is still going to have this 5 or fewer type of rule. And if you're going to have more than 5 people in a dwelling unit, you're going to have to do interconnected fire alarm systems plus potential suppression and a new certificate of occupancy. You need an architect, etc. So there's other codes that may apply. All right, how many employees are required for the number of 5 youth occupants? I think that's going to be dependent on, if it's DYS, it seems to me that everybody's getting by with 1. I imagine that there might be some difference if there's an OMAS, which is mental health and addiction services facility, that if there's any more intensive care required for anybody. But I think it's in the vast majority of cases, there needs to be 1 person on site. I have seen people propose where they tell me that there are 2. Maybe if Kenya's still on, she would know the answer to that. Let's see, where can I get information about requirements for youth group homes? You could start with the ORC, the Ohio Administrative Code, and then looking at the Department of Youth Services website would tell you a lot about what's required for those homes. And then last question in the chat is, can the city help? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so that's part of the reason I put the question about the community engagement plans for residential facilities. So if you follow that code, the minimum requirement that the group home operator has to give you is a phone number and the amount of time that they have to respond. They don't even have to give you the name of the operator. They don't have to tell you where they're based out of. You don't get their license number. You don't get anything like that from them as a requirement from the state. It's literally just a phone number and a number of days to respond. So that's why I was asking if there were any requirements as part of this conditional use that you were collecting additional information on group homes, because it's impossible to get a hold of these people and to hold them accountable when literally all you have is a phone number and time to respond.
Yeah, I agree that the community engagement requirement is very thin and not helpful. So what I'd say is our permit applications themselves require that you tell us all of that information. Here, hang on a second. Oh wait, I can't be. So you'll gain more information if all the state's giving you is the community engagement plan, which I think they should be giving you all of the public information submitted that isn't private information of the individuals living there. Asking for more than just the community engagement plan would be the smart move. Asking us for whatever information we have on file for any new homes would be good. And then again, we're happy to be the liaison to request data from the state in whatever the right phrasing of that request needs to be in order for you to get what you need out of that. But I completely agree that the community engagement plans ain't it in a lot of cases in terms of doing anything helpful. I do think that the new code addressed a little bit. I mean, I don't know that the point isn't really for the community engagement plan to be full engagement. Although I think in the DYS case, the new legislation says that the local legislative body has to be notified before something opens. So you've got that actual engagement occurring. In terms of how fast somebody has to respond. I mean, this is all stuff that if it's really lagging, if it's not going well, complaints to the actual license are important. So you need to report to the state and we can help you do that. Can the city help with contact information for the state licensing agencies to file official complaints about the condition and or operation of the types of group homes? Yes, we can. There are complaint portals that are available for each of these, whether that's through, basically through all of those state agencies, they have ways to report.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. You just said, they would have to notify the body, the neighborhood maybe, where they're moving into. If a homeowner decides to rent and not disclose to the rentee that their house is not acceptable or it doesn't meet the code for group home or foster care, how then would a neighborhood, I guess what I'm saying, how would a neighborhood then stop this home from becoming a group foster or mentally challenged home? How would, I'm sorry, how would
Understood.
this?
No, I get, yeah, you're looking, what would the mechanics be? I think this notification requirement helps agencies and whoever provide input and gather up data about something. It didn't seem to me that there's some particular mechanic. It's not like the neighborhood gets to vote in some way. But if there's data to be had that the state should know about, it is a period of time where you can supply that information. Hey, look at this serious problem at this house. Has anyone seen this? Would be a thing to be able to do in that time period. You know, I did, again, I feel like I'm still engaging with the state agencies on understanding the public health and environmental concerns about certain places that I would hope never would have another home opened, just based on the environmental factors around it. And, you know, we used that period of time to talk about crime statistics and the things that had happened and all the boarded and structurally nuisance properties around that area. I think that is what that notification is providing the opportunity to locally give input on.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess though the public input as a conditional use for all new group homes going forward requires that they come before
Yeah.
plan board, right? Or
Okay, so if it's a conditional use through I'm sorry, I should, being unclear. So if it's a conditional use permit application at the local level, the property owners within, or the residents within 250 feet of that home are going to be notified by us, the city, about that review process. And that's kind of the same thing, information gathering, come give public testimony, but that's actually, that testimony would be to influence the Board of Zoning Appeals and their decision on the outcome.
So Pete, it would go to Board of Zoning Appeals, not Plan Board.
right.
Right.
I apologize.
No, you're good. And so that's what that conditional use process would be on the local level. To clarify, that comes from these use tables. So if you see a C in these use tables, then it's a conditional use that goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So that's going to be foster care group homes. That's also going to be those facilities that are in multifamily districts that are larger, like with more people living in them. All right, so that would be our local process. It's at the state level. I didn't mean to mishmash. They have, for foster care, said that they are going to now notify local legislative bodies, and that's here in Dayton and anywhere, and that's a different sort of thing, but that's another call for information, essentially, from my view.
And sorry, those P stars, I'm assuming the stars were not defined. That's subject to the 12 per area for the group homes for foster.
Yeah, so with those stars, these asterisks or whatever you would say plurally, they just continue to reference, they basically what they're saying is they are subject to these specific use regulations.
Okay.
So anything that's here is applicable to anything with a star next to it.
Okay.
And all of them have it, to summarize. So any conditional use in any P star thing, you go and look at those standards.
And just jumping in, since we have a lot of neighborhood leaders on here, especially for the Board of Zoning Appeals stuff, like they would go before Land Use Board, and we, by just matter of practice, send out land use cases to neighborhood presidents, vice presidents, stakeholders in that particular neighborhood, adjacent neighborhoods, things like that. So we'll continue to do that for this as well. We haven't talked about the state communication, if they're communicating with the city, how we would necessarily communicate that out. So that's something that I'm mulling through as we talk.
And just like for point of reference, there are a handful of communities that have had previously, like one home or something concerned everybody, and they all went to like change their ordinances back in the day. But in terms of this inundation issue and this this fresh round of things that the state is doing as well, that was all lobbying from the city of Dayton that caused that to happen. We're also, this is a newly drafted thing that we are putting forward that now other jurisdictions are looking at and gaining information and ideas from. That's what's happening. They are coming and asking, what are you guys doing? And I expect that we'll see other jurisdictions writing codes that are even better than this. And I might come to see, wow, that's a really good idea. We should have done that. And maybe we come and we revise something that we have in our draft. But I'd take this as a 1.0 that somebody's going to make a nice 2.0 out of in the future. I'm already seeing some of those thoughts happening. We're continuing to have conversation with our peer cities and other jurisdictions that are dealing with the same issues around us. Keegan, I've taken your point on maybe installing or at least checking on what the existing mechanics of revoking a conditional use permit or any permit within our system. I think that's an important thing to go check back up on. Make sure that language is what we want it to be. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns or anything we might be able to help clarify as, before we move this forward?
Just, is the plan board meeting on July 8th at 4 or 4:30? It's 4:30, right?
4:30. It's always at 4:30, right? Okay, good.
Thought so. I couldn't remember. And it's
I couldn't either. Thanks, Jen. This is good stuff.
the community room, right?
Yes, I have. Sorry.
Yeah, the PRC room would be it, right, Jen?
Yeah, mezzanine level.
Yeah, okay.
It may be in the PRC, it may be in commission chambers, but we'll have people in the lobby to help direct you.
Okay.
How much room
I have a question.
Yes,
Another
ma'am.
question. Hello?
Oh, yep, I can hear you.
Okay, you said during this time right now, and you're drafting this order or ordinance or this
Yep.
set of laws, and you anticipate other areas around us may do the same thing. Why? Okay, let me ask you this. Can you get a jump start or a head start, let's say with Trotwood, and say, hey, this is what we're doing and blah, blah, blah. Let's kind of work something together. So Trotwood, Dayton, maybe, what's the other? Huber, all of those. Is that even something possible that can be done? To work together in advance, since we're in a stage now of waiting and trying to get things together. They may have ideas, like you said,
Right.
that I didn't think of that. Or, yeah, this is.
Yes, that is actually one thing we have done is our deputy director, Emily Crow, previously worked for Harrison Township. And then the zoning administrator at Trotwood also worked for Harrison Township. So these relationships are very fresh for her. She just started working here 6 months ago. And so that was one of the first things she made sure we were doing, is having a regional level conversation with the players at hand. So I've been talking with Tyler, Hauk, and Chad Atkins at those jurisdictions. We've been comparing notes. I think we are a little bit ahead of them, so I won't be able to, you know, unless we pass six, I have people waiting for us to finish this, so I can't exactly wait until they're finished with their processes and all the people they're engaging with locally to go ahead with ours. But they are certainly aware of what we were doing, and they have been able to provide their own thoughts and insights based on what they've seen in, you know, in their cities.
Well, I assume we talked to Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, Hamilton County, Cincinnati, because obviously somewhere along the line, somebody in our city government, the law department or somebody, had a much more liberal interpretation of how these various group homes can be regulated, just given the explosion, you know, the heat map you showed. So I'm assuming you looked at those ordinances as well in some of those other larger cities.
I've looked at all their ordinances. The only people I've talked to are when we went and visited the city of Cincinnati. I was speaking with their zoning administrator, and here's what a lot of these conversations are. What are you guys doing? How do you define this? How did you find the information for this? This is very new for everyone. We are all trained for building buildings and we're having to do this kind of social exploration, and this is a very legally intensive thing, and the landscape has changed so much. So when these things were defined many years ago, and you know, Dayton zoning code written in 2006, this wasn't a problem at that time. It just simply was not an issue. There were more foster care homes out there to absorb the foster care children in the system at that time, so I am told. And then we have trended in this direction so quickly. I think that there are definitely jurisdictions out there that have codes that could be challenged in court and they could lose because they're so restrictive. It just hasn't happened. They never have been challenged. But we are in the public eye. We will be scrutinized. We better do our best to walk the line properly for everybody who's involved. That's, you know, that's part of our job. But I would agree. I think that, you know, our code in the past could have done more on the balance of scrutiny, essentially.
Well, so Kirsten, one of the other things that I wanted to bring up, and I can't remember if we had talked about it or not, but use of like campus institutional zoning for Shaw and Acres. So as you know, we have 37 youth foster homes in Northwest Dayton not utilizing that campus, but that campus originally had what, a dozen buildings in it that were set up as duplexes that could have been used for group homes, and that would have been a good place for them. It's close to their social services, it's close to their caseworkers. I mean, I think that we would probably welcome additional use there if it took pressure off the rest of the area. But again, like I said, you know, that when you're talking about the zoning in 2006, all of those houses were functioning then, and then they were bulldozed in like 2012 after, you know, 10 years of neglect or more. I don't know how recently they were occupied, but that's one of the things that I think should be taken into consideration too, is a specialty use case potentially for that, because the land literally can't be used for anything else. There is a deed restriction that it can only be used for youth services. And so building additional group home housing there, purpose built, you know, that operators could rent or occupy, I think that we would be more supportive of that if capacity had to be built up.
I think the only difference, or the only other, I mean, looking at the different lens of the other services that have to be provided, especially education, it for now presents a strong argument not to increase for any reason. So what you're saying, if it relieved pressure in some other regard, maybe, but that takes a lot of coordinate. These are all like separately licensed, separately owned homes that are in North Central.
Sure.
There's
just
no
wanna
like
bring that up
master
'cause-
planner, you know what I mean?
Right. I just wanted to bring that up because, like I said, that was something that occurred previously, and there were, recreational facilities on site that could have been utilized. But you talk about the campus institutional opportunities and commercial properties in those different districts being able to utilize that space. That was one place where I think that could have occurred.
I'm opening this link from the chat. Yes, I have read this and some other guidance that fair housing. I mean, I've read this stuff and it's just sent me into a tailspin, Monica, because it's the way that fair housing reads at the federal level and what they're directing zoning to do versus what the state law says and what they're directing zoning to do. They conflict, and we have to figure out what to do with this like strange landscape we're in.
Yeah, and we found another joint DOJ and HUD document.
Yeah.
And I kept looking for it. Now I can't find it, but it kind of the net of it was individual jurisdictions, municipalities can set up zoning requirements as long as they're applied consistently across all groups.
Right, which is what a statement to make. That is,
yeah.
I mean, we've had lawyers, at the planning and zoning workshop, we had a panel of lawyers from Coolidge Law giving advice on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And the panel varied from, well, gosh, in theory, you don't make a family get a permit to go live somewhere. So how can we make a group home get a permit to live somewhere, all the way to people, I would say maybe misunderstanding fair housing, or at least the guidance I'm reading, where they're saying like, if you have no intent to discriminate, then you have not discriminated, which is not true. It's really an effect that, if you've effectuated discriminatory or disparate outcomes, you have discriminated, whether you realize it or not. So there's what we're trying to do, and that's some of the reason, I think people will ask the question, why are you changing the definition of family? And that is because we're basically trying to set up a system where we're treating everybody equally under the occupancy standards of our Chapter 93. So we want to say everyone is subject to the standards of Chapter 93 in terms of occupancy. So we're trying to walk the line here as best we can. I think my thinking is we have facts on our side in terms of the systems and the guidance that are out there are not talking about a hyper concentrated issue that we are experiencing right now in Dayton. What do you do when your services cannot, what good is it for the youth living in those homes if they go to a school and the services are just weighed down by everybody's needs all at the same time? That's not how the system was imagined, and we ought to protect everybody from falling through the cracks of the system. We're trying to create something where, it's good for everybody to live in. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to ask, maybe not in chat, or just unmute and ask anything else for the evening?
Thank you for hosting us.
Thanks for sitting through such a dry topic. I really appreciate you listening to me read a code to you. So I'm delighted.
One last question. Well, I have one last question. When he was talking about what used to be Sean Acres, in my mind, what if a collaboration of a team of people could get that with the school on the ground and with all the amenities, the newer, updated amenities that they have? Would that still fit the code for, but see, what did Sean Acres fall under? Was it group home, or was it foster, or was it both? Because some lived there.
I am not as familiar as Keegan is with that arrangement, but it sounds to me like something that in this draft would be considered possible under a planned development.
Okay. Okay.
Possible being, you know, like, I don't know what the likelihood of a passage of anything like that would really be, especially in the environment we're in right now, with many homes. But it, you know, mechanically speaking, you could attempt to pass it that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This meeting's been recorded, so if you want to go back and review it, I think it's probably worth at least a couple rewatches. We're gonna post it on the website eventually. I believe Mike Squire's gonna send the recording out to everyone or a link to it. We'll also have the slides available for you. We'll get those sent out. And please come to us with any questions, and you're of course welcome to come to Plan Board and or City Commission if you'd like to voice your concerns in that venue. So thank you all very much. I hope you all have a wonderful 4th of July holiday.
Have a nice dinner.
Dinner.
Boy,
Here, thank you.
this is awesome.